Hello and welcome to 20 for 20. My name is Christine Robinson with the Elks National Foundation, and today I am joined by Victor Yee, a 2020 Top 20 Most Valuable Student Scholar, sponsored by Whittier, California, Lodge number 1258. Thank you so much for joining us today, Victor.
Thank you so much for having me.
And my first question is can you introduce yourself and tell us where you're from?
Yeah, of course. My name is Victor Yee. I am 18 years old, from Los Angeles in California. And I, again, am sponsored by the Whittier Lodge.
Awesome. And where will you go to school and what will you study while you're there?
I will be attending the University of Southern California, or USC, to study international relations and the global economy. But just before then, I've decided to defer my admissions for a year to study Arabic in Morocco with the US Department of State.
That that is so cool. How did you decide to do that?
Yeah, so I applied for this fully funded government scholarship program called the National Security Language Initiative for Youth. Essentially, they're a whole year program that is an immersion where a cohort of about 15 students go together to another foreign country to learn a critical language that the US deems to really amend relations with. And so I applied to the Arabic pathway to study Arabic in Morocco because I felt like I needed to kind of get out of my comfort zone and also learn a language that I think will be particularly useful for something like my own major of international relations. And fortunately, I was accepted in late April and they gave me a week to decide. And now I've decided to really just spend the next year in Morocco, really getting to know culture, Arabic language and literature, and then coming back full force into university the year after.
That's awesome. So when will you start the program?
Yeah, the program is aiming to start in mid-September. We will be flying first to Washington, D.C. for an orientation with the U.S. Embassy, and then we will be heading off to Morocco until the end of May next year. So from then, I won't be able to travel home or go home for Christmas breaks or spring breaks, but I'm super excited to really get to experience a new world, a new place where it's not only homogenous, but also a religious country where it's going to be definitely outside of my comfort zone, but I'm super, super excited.
Yeah, that sounds like an opportunity you couldn't pass up.
Exactly.
Do you speak other languages as well?
Yes. So I am fluent in English, Mandarin, Spanish. I'm currently learning French since the quarantine began. So I'm trying to learn, hopefully, the goal is to learn the six languages of the United Nations, which is Arabic, including that, and also the last one being Russian. So I'm hoping that by the end of my college career journey, that I will be able to kind of get these six languages conquered. But I am just trying to learn my best, not only learning the language, but being able to learn the culture as well, because I think it's super important and crucial not to be able to speak to through the person's mind, but also to speak through their heart. And so being to learn that language is going to be super crucial for me as I open more doors and opportunities and get to explore when I travel overseas.
That sounds so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing, and we wish you luck as that adventure begins. And what does we know that Elk scholars are passionate about service, and that Elks are also passionate about service. What does service mean to you, and how have you been involved with helping your community?
Totally. I think service really means paving the road forward for the next generation, as well as giving it back to those that need it the most. And I think that I'm super privileged to really get an education where I not only was able to take higher level courses, but also had the time to engage in outside of activities that were really passionate and interested towards my particular field of study. I think personally, I've really done that through the start of my own nonprofit that is an education nonprofit that really teaches students how to actually launch their own social impact projects. Personally, I in 10th grade was super frustrated that in a particular history class, all we were doing was just regurgitating information about what happened in the 1700s and 1800s. And we were talking about the French Revolution. And at the time, there was also a Venezuelan crisis going on. And so I felt that there was a need to kind of connect real world current issues with what was happening in the past to actually not commit those same mistakes ever again. But I was struck down by my teacher when they mentioned that I had to stick to what needed to be tested. And so therefore, there were other people that were going to solve the problems of climate change, of international oppression, of different international issues that were super prevalent in today's century. And I felt that I could not wait for the next generation or the next adult to really make those changes, because I knew that I was in a position of power, not to only be educated, but to actually solve those issues. So that's when I started an education nonprofit called the Nova Youth that really teaches three core values: research, collaboration, and communication. And through workshops and conferences, we really empower and motivate students to actually take their passions outside of the classroom interest and really impact themselves through community learning. And so we have students that have started things like self-confidence projects in their schools because there was a 10-year-old that was bullied for her love of science, and I think as a middle schooler. And also there was another student that was passionate about climate change but couldn't do anything about it in the biology classroom when all they were learning about were about cells and protein structures. And so I think that there is a lot of application when it comes to learning about what is happening currently in the world and how they can actually use the knowledge that they learn inside the classroom experience to actually apply it to real world change inside their own communities.
That sounds like you're super involved. I love that you had a situation that really propelled you to that point, like hearing no and then turning it into a yes and saying like, I'm gonna make this happen, is really awesome. So we also, like, your generation is so committed to service, and I think it's important that you guys are uplifted in that commitment. So okay, what is something that you are most proud of?
I think I'm particularly most proud of the work that my nonprofit has been able to do. I think it's been a long road of 2 or 3 years of starting from the beginning. I can tell you, Christine, the amount of rejections that I had in the beginning, where I went to community managers, I went to people that hosted community centers and also libraries, and they would tell me that youth don't hold workshops. Youth cannot teach other youth, or also statements like, there are other adults working on this subject, so you can go back to school now. So I had a lot of those experiences where, there were a lot of times where they didn't encourage youth to really get that opportunity to really speak their minds and actually be educated on those issues. I don't think that they realize that, like, so many people are engaged on social media or, read the news to the point where they understand what's going on around the world. And so now I think I'm most proud of the fact that there's a mindset shift when it not only comes to my local community, but when we're hosting workshops and conferences internationally. That I think the one that I can pinpoint was when we actually hosted a summit in the capital of Iran, where we hosted a social responsibility summit, which is one of the craziest things that I can be able to say, because not only is that country super homogenous, but really, I think, traditional in the aspects where they don't talk about subjects like social responsibility, but that it took months and months of engagement with city officials and teachers and young students as small as 10 years old to be talking about issues like, how are you going to solve poverty in your local community? What does it look like for them to actually engage in fighting against plastic pollution? And so these small subjects that are trying to be engaged outside of their classroom experience has been super worthwhile for me, because it's shown that even though there's a country that does not really encourage those conversations, there are students that are like-minded across the world that are engaging in those everyday activities that allow themselves that, like, maybe 10 years from now are going to be the landscape of those trailblazers or those change makers. And so I think I'm personally proud to see that there are so many young people across the world that are just waiting for exposure and are waiting for encouragement and motivation to happen. And I think that that's been such a highlight of my experience, from whether that's in Iran or hosting a conference in Dubai about leadership and what it means to actually be at the forefront of innovation. I think there's so many different applications for young students just to kind of get involved and put their fingers and put their legs into what is the real world and actually get to real, and I think affect real world impact when it comes to being involved in internships or taking themselves on with new projects and initiatives. So a lot of different key components, and I think it's been so important, especially encouraging for me to kind of continue my work personally.
Absolutely. Okay, and then what does it mean? I'm sorry, that's not what I meant to say. What is being an Elks Scholar going to help you do? What will it allow you to do?
Totally. I think it's been super helpful so far. We had an amazing weekend getting to know each other, whether that's through the games or through the personal stories. But I think personally, the network is going to be super crucial and helpful. I think that, even though we all have different interests, whether there's one studying in environmental studies or another one studying biology or chemistry, I think there's a multitude of interdisciplinary connection that we are all bounded by that forefront of service. And so I'm super grateful to have connected to one particular scholar in my community. His name is Daniel, and it's been super helpful to see that his love for economics and government is going to take him super far as he continues his studies at Vanderbilt. And I think that one particular initiative that we've been able to start recently was through this podcast project, where I kind of reached out to him. I was connected through a history professor that had taught about foreign policy and did extensive research at Yale, and was going to wonder about the effectiveness of teaching history inside of classroom experiences. And so then we started this podcast project where we're not only elevating youth voices of all diversity and backgrounds and culture, but we're aiming to kind of bridge and also affect the way that history is being brokenly taught inside the classroom, where everything is currently one-sided. It's not empowering at all. So if you sit inside the history classroom, you're not going to feel that you're going to be the figures in history that are actually affecting that change. And I think that also in reality, there's a disconnect between historians that are writing amazing books and have been experts for their fields for decades, and then for young students that may not necessarily need to be history nerds or history fanatics, but they love enjoying history stories and storytelling and cross-cultural experiences. And so this podcast will be serving to not only bridge our necessity to read a history book and then interview the authors and interviewers directly, but also get to create this cohort where Daniel is a Jewish American, but I'm a Chinese American. And so it's kind of interesting to see that we can bring together people from all diversities and cultures, but essentially then mold it into an American story of what it means to have a democracy. And so I think it's super interesting, and hopefully we'll be kind of, getting it off the ground and making a lot of impact as we kind of finish off the post-production. We've been super fortunate to kind of partner with existing companies like Random House Books, who's been able to kind of get us along the journey. We have a partnership with Radio Public, who's the biggest podcasting network in the United States. So I think we have a lot of adult support, and we're super excited to see where this entrepreneurial venture is going to take us.
Yeah, that is so cool. I'm so glad that you and Daniel connected on something that you're passionate about, and that you were able to use your network of Elk scholars to really to get started on such a project. So that's really awesome, and we can't wait to listen once the podcast is produced, and we're all looking forward to it. So that's great. What was your favorite part of the top 20 virtual leadership weekend?
I personally think it was the long hours of the board game sessions online. The reason why I say that is that it really broke down the barriers of the seriousness of the conversations, and it really allowed us to pull through our own personalities. And I think that's personally the one way in which I connected with Daniel, was through the small jokes between conversations, and also getting to meet with existing scholars that were there to support us. I remember vividly when we started at like 5 p.m. PST, and then I was there up until 2 a.m. the next day. So it was exciting to see that we were able to connect with past scholars. There were many that, were there not only chit-chatting about their own personal journeys and backgrounds, but also about what they're hopeful for the future. And I think it was super, super amazing to see that, there's, I think, cohort of scholars from across the country ready to talk about service, but also getting ready to have fun as well. Like, it's not just a very intellectually minded community, but a community where we are able to connect on so many different levels. And so definitely the area where we were able to kind of break down the barriers and then have fun and then be able to talk about anything has been super, super exciting during those personal games.
Yeah, it was awesome to see how everyone bonded throughout the virtual weekend, and then that you all decided to stay up and play games. Like, that's a long time to look at a screen. So
It's the longest I've ever been on a Zoom call. I think 7 hours is, oh no, even 9 hours is a record so far, but I definitely am grateful. And I think it didn't really feel like 9 hours too, because we'd be chit-chatting and talking through different board games. We'd be switching between drawing Pictionary to creating small kind of virtual, like, humanity games. And then, so it's really awesome to see that we were able to not only move across different cultures and different aspects, but then also at the end, we were able to kind of stay in touch afterwards, which was super amazing to see as well.
Yeah, the bonds that the top 20 form are always really cool to see, and the fact that the virtual component didn't stop you all from forming those bonds was great. So we all, from the staff perspective, we all enjoyed knowing that that was happening. And I like this question a lot. So, what were you doing when you found out that you were a top 20 MVS scholar? When you got
Oh my
that
God.
email from Colleen?
Yeah. Christine, you don't know how shook I think I was. I was reading the email and I had to check it a couple times because I don't think that at first, it was shocking to see that I even made the stage. So being a semifinalist was truly like I think a life-changing moment as well. And then when I got the email to say that I was a National Elks Scholar, I don't know. I think I ran outside of my door and was screaming at my mother in English, but she doesn't speak English, so it was interesting to see that she was also ecstatic, but also a little bit nervous as well because she didn't know what I was doing, and so I think it was just a multitude of excitement, joy, and then being able to just afterwards see who was on the list because then I was like, oh my god, like how am I able to I think be selected among these amazing group of scholars. And so honestly, it was such a I don't know how to explain it. It cannot be explained in words, but I definitely was at my screen, and then I jumped out of my chair, and then I ran to the kitchen, where I met my mother, and couldn't explain it to English to Chinese to her clearly just yet. So it's definitely very very exciting, and also really was astonishing to kind of get that award.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I mean, you said you couldn't put it into words, but I think your energy and excitement about the explanation says a lot. So that's cool. So what makes you, Victor, an Elks scholar?
Yeah, I think for me, the reason why I think was selected as an Elk Scholar was that I was well rounded to the aspect that I was not only academically oriented, but I did put what I felt was academics into the service that I was able to provide. And so whether that's through my nonprofit or through another festival that I launched through the Bezos Family Foundation, where I was selected as a Bezos Scholar. We worked with Jackie Bezos, who's Jeff Bezos' mother, in Colorado this past summer to talk about how to actually create community change projects. And so for me, one of the big aspects that I really felt inclined to actually work towards was also mental health. And I think that was particularly a subject that is a taboo, especially in my community where it's a lot of Asian immigrants, a lot of Latino immigrants, and I think it's super helpful to see that I'm not only bridging myself to, I think, get the application of my knowledge inside the classroom, but then now I'm actually focusing on bridging, I think, the lifestyles of young people and also adults to actually see that there's a lot more than the pressure that they feel inside school culture. And so I think for being an out scholar, not only am I applying myself to communities, but I think I'm empowering others to be community change makers as well. I think that's the biggest aspect is that I'm not only at the forefront, but I think that, after I kind of continue my work and kind of dive into the empowerment activities that like later on, these young people are going to be in my position doing the things that I was doing. And so now I see that really clearly when I see young people as young as 10 or 11, Christine, where they're going to the administration. They're saying, I need to have this project happen. I want to see this happen because there is no awareness, there is no motivation, there is no encouragement of this specific field. How can we actually equip these teachers with these young students to actually make that change? And I think that's what an Elk Scholar means to me is that not only am I bettering myself and my education, but that I'm also encouraged to really give back to the students that really have a lot of potential as well, that are waiting to have the experiences, are waiting to have the opportunities. And I think that it's super empowering for myself to really see that I think I'm not only empowering other young adults when I'm speaking at different conferences about change making, but I'm also talking to young students about how they can actually start to make an impact from a young age.
Awesome. And what is, we're at the last question actually. So if you could say anything to the Elks, what would you say?
I want to say first, thank you. And then I also wanted to say that there's a lot in store for me that I have yet to unleash the power of, which I think is super empowering and super amazing to hear because all of us Elk scholars in the end were like 17, 18, or 19. And so when we realized that, like, we've been able to, we not necessarily know what the future holds for us, but I think the most important aspect is that we've been able to maximize the resources that we've had in our local communities. And now with the national spotlight of the National Elks Foundation, I think we're able to leverage that power further and actually increase the amount of power that we've been able to have in our local communities to actually spark more change, to spark more conversation, and to spark more impact. And I think that through this experience, I definitely want to tell the Elks that there's still a lot for us to do. I think as we go into college, there's so many different opportunities and experiences that we're yet to hold, whether that's through the small trips that the lodge is going to host, or the different conferences, or actually just to mingle with other amazing scholars through their network. And I think that there's a lot for us not only to learn to actually apply to our own careers, but I think also to start impacting more people as we kind of get out of our communities and go into our university experiences. So I think the one message that I want to tell is that there's still a long journey ahead of us, but we're super excited to really bring forth the Elks family along on our own personal journeys.
Awesome. And we're so proud of you, Victor, and we're so excited to watch your journey as an Elks Scholar. And we just thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing everything that you did. It was awesome to get to know you and to hear from you. And I know our Elks audience is going to love watching this video as well. So thank you, Victor, for joining us. And thanks to all of our viewers for tuning in. If you liked the show, hit the like button below and be sure to subscribe to the ENF's YouTube channel. So thank you so much for helping us build stronger communities and connecting with your #Elks family. We'll see you next time. Bye.